Hello everybody, welcome to another video by Shruti IAS. Today we are going to discuss, this is an initiative that we are starting where we are going to discuss 20 years of polity PYQs that have come in the UPSC prelims paper. We are going to start from the first paper today, which is the 2005 paper. Now, this is a video which is a bit different from all the previous year questions discussions because we are just not going to sit down and discuss why, what, where, and when in every PYQ. What we're going to do is we're going to mark the exact chapter numbers and the page numbers in M. Lakshmikant edition 7 from where these PYQs have actually come. Once we do that, it'll give us this very nice, we can highlight in a book very nicely. And once we do this and when we go back to revise it, it's easier for us to remember the important things, the things that have already been asked, because a lot of times while revision we tend to reread the entire chapter, and this will help us reduce that time. So just to show you how I have done it personally for myself, this is a snapshot from my Lakshmikant book where I've just highlighted it, a particular question or maybe the solution to that question with like a green highlighter, and I've written like pre 2016 question number 100, or let's say there's a question from pre 2013 question number 69. What this is doing for me is when I'm coming back to this chapter, be it the chapter of Panchayati Raj system or any chapter related to parliament, I don't have to read the entire chapter. If I have really less time, I can quickly glance through all the questions that have already been asked in UPSC. Starting with the questions, the first question is about Panchayati Raj and municipalities. Consider the following statements. Part 9 of the Constitution of India contains provisions for panchayats and was inserted by the Constitution 73rd Amendment Act 1992. If you see here under chapter 39 Panchayati Raj, page 388, it is directly given here that this act, 73rd Amendment Act of 1992, has added a new part 9 to the Constitution of India. This part is entitled as the Panchayats and consists of the provisions from Articles 243 to Article 243O. So the first statement is correct here. Coming to the second statement, Part 9A of the Constitution of India contains provisions for municipalities, and Article 243Q envisages two types of municipalities, a municipal council and a municipal corporation for every state. Now coming to chapter 40, municipalities, page number 399. Even though part 9A of the Constitution, as it is given here, of the Constitution gives us provisions for municipalities, and Article 243Q gives us the types of municipalities, but as you can see on page number 400, there are three types of municipalities, not two. So this particular question, this particular statement becomes wrong. So our answer becomes only A. Moving forward to another question. Yes. So here the question is about special provisions for some states and about citizenship. So starting from point number 1, Articles 371A to 371I were inserted in the Constitution of India to meet regional demands of Nagaland, Assam, Manipur, Andhra Pradesh, Sikkim, Mizoram, Arunachal Pradesh, and Goa. You can see the answer here on chapter 77, which talks about the special provisions for some states, page number 564. Here the entire list is given. You can see I have just zoomed into it. You can see the entire list is given here, where Article 371A is for Nagaland, B is for Assam, C gives us provisions for Manipur, then there's Andhra Pradesh, then there's Sikkim, Mizoram, Arunachal Pradesh, and Goa. Coming to the second statement, Constitution of India and the United States of America envisage a dual polity, the union and the states, but a single citizenship. This particular question's answer is in chapter 4. Chapter 4 talks about salient features of the Constitution. On page number 32, under the header Single Citizenship, we find this statement: Though the Indian constitution is federal and envisages a dual polity, it provides only for a single citizenship, that is the Indian citizenship. In countries like USA, on the other hand, each person is not only a US citizen but also a citizen of the particular state to which he belongs. So this statement becomes wrong because here it's saying that both India and USA have a single citizenship. Coming to the statement 3, which talks about which is from the chapter 7, citizenship chapter, page number 67. The statement is: a naturalized citizen of India can never be deprived of his citizenship. Here we can clearly see in this third paragraph by deprivation, I mean, how a citizenship can be removed. It is compulsory termination by Indian citizenship by the central government if the citizen has obtained the citizenship by fraud, the citizen has shown disloyalty to the Constitution of India, which basically means that ye ho sakta hai, like this can happen. So here 2 and 3 become wrong and only statement 1 is correct. I hope see, the entire idea behind this entire thing is not to deep do a deep dive into like the solutions, because I think we need to go ahead and read these solutions ourselves. The idea is to mark these on our pages in our book so that when we are reading them, we can focus on the highlighted parts in the book. Again, coming to question number 4. Coming to question number 4, the topic is right to property. Let's look at the question. Article 301 pertains to the right to property. Let's read all the statements first. Statement 2, right to property is a legal right but not a fundamental right. Statement 3, Article 300A was inserted in the Constitution of India by the Congress government at the center by the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act. Now, statement 1 is directly given in chapter 16, Interstate Relations, page 169. Article 301 to 307 in part 13 of the Constitution deal with trade, commerce, and intercourse within the territory. Article 301 declares that trade, commerce, and intercourse throughout the territory of India shall be free. So we can see here it does not talk about right to property. So 1 is wrong. Coming to chapter 8, Fundamental Rights, page number 74. I think it's the fourth or fifth paragraph. Here we can see the statement: however, the right to property was deleted from the list of fundamental rights by the 44th Amendment Act of 1978. It made a legal right under 300A in part 12 of the Constitution. So at present, there are only 6 fundamental rights. Both are statements that right to property is a legal right, not a fundamental right, and 300A was inserted in the Constitution by 44th Constitutional Amendment Act is given here. So statement 2 and statement 3 are correct, 1 becomes wrong. Coming to question number 5, I think this particular question was wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. The Constitutional Amendment Bill, 98th Amendment Bill is related to. While searching, I realized on page number 724, Appendix 4, which is a list of all the constitutional amendments, 98th Amendment does not talk about the Constitution of National Judicial Commission. It's Article 99, it's Amendment 99 of 2014, which talks about the appointment of National Judicial Appointments Committee, NJAC. So I think the answer should be B, but here it should be 99th because none of the other options technically go with the 98th Amendment as well. Coming to the 6th question, let's read the questions first. Consider the following statement: the Constitution of India has 20 parts. There are 390 articles in the Constitution of India in all. 9, 10th, 11, 12 schedules were added to the Constitution of India by the Constitutional Amendment Acts. Directly we can see the answer in chapter 4, Salient Features of the Constitution, page number 27. Originally, the Constitution contained a preamble, 395 articles, and 8 schedules, divided into 22 parts. So 20 parts directly becomes wrong, and 395 articles, so this also becomes wrong because initially also the number of articles were more than the number 20 and 390 given here. Currently, there are about 470 articles, and the Constitution is divided into 25 parts and 12 schedules. So 1 and 2 become wrong. Third statement: 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th schedules. So here it's written 4 parts. these four parts and four schedules, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, were added through various amendments carried out at 1951. So here is our answer. So only statement 3 is correct, 1 and 2 are incorrect. Coming to the next question, which is about who was the chairman of the Union Constitution Committee of the Constituent Assembly. We have four options: B.R. Ambedkar, J.B. Kriplani, Jawaharlal Nehru, and Aladi Ayyar. Here, if we come to chapter 2, which is talking about making of the constitution, page number 14, directly a list of major committees is given down below, and you can check here from number 2, Union Constitution Committee, the chairman was Jawaharlal Nehru. Coming to the next question, the topic is Government of India Act 1935, which can also technically be called as a part of modern history. Let's look at all the three statements. The Government of India Act 1935 provided for the provincial autonomy, establishment of federal court, all India federation at the center. I think anybody who has studied any like modern history in any format, they know that all these three statements are correct. But if you want to check where it is directly given, you go to chapter number 1, historical background, page number 7. Under the section Government of India Act, there the features are given below. In feature number 1, it provided for the establishment of an all India federation. Coming to point number 2, it abolished diarchy in the provinces and introduced provincial autonomy in its place. The provinces were allowed to act as autonomous units of administration in their defined spheres. So statement 1 is correct, statement 3 is correct. Now regarding statement 2, the establishment of federal court, point number 10, it provided for the establishment of a federal court which was set up in 1937, page 8. So I think this particular question is also done. Coming to the next question, the topic is Supreme Court and High Courts. Let's read the question. Question number 9, point number 1, the Parliament cannot enlarge the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court of India, and its jurisdiction is limited to that conferred by the Constitution. Point number 2, we have the officers and the servants of the Supreme Court and High Court are appointed by the concerned Chief Justice, and the administrative expenses are charged on the Consolidated Fund of India. So here, if we directly look at chapter 30, so we start with chapter 26, which is the Supreme Courts, page number 289. Here we can see in point number 9, we are talking about the powers of the Supreme Court. So its jurisdiction cannot be curtailed. So basically here it's written cannot enlarge the jurisdiction. The point is it cannot curtail it, मतलब कम नहीं कर सकते हैं. So the Parliament is not authorized to curtail the jurisdiction and powers of the Supreme Court. However, the Parliament can extend the same. So बढ़ा सकते हैं, extend कर सकते हैं, enlarge कर सकते हैं. So statement 1 becomes wrong. Coming to statement 2, chapter 34, High Courts, page number 356 and 357. Here, the first part of this statement are appointed by the concerned Chief Justice, and the are appointed by the concerned Chief Justice. So we look here in independence of High Court, point number 1, mode of appointment. Here we can see that how the judges of the court are appointed by the President in consultation with the members of the judiciary itself, that is the Chief Justice of India, right? And similarly, in the same point on page number 357, we can check the expenses charged on consolidated fund. So we can see here the salaries, allowances of the judges and the pension of the staff and administrative expenses are charged on the consolidated fund. Again, we can check here that the pension, I think technically I've missed something here. I should have added the same page for the expenses of like the Supreme Court judges, so because both are asked here. But I think it's pretty clear that similar to this point, a similar chapter is in the Supreme Court chapter, and a similar particular paragraph is there which will talk about the expenses that are charged on Consolidated Fund of India, right? So according to this, only statement number 2 is correct. I hope this is clear to everybody. If there are any doubts and if anything that I have done wrong, please mention it in the comments. The next topic and the next question number 10, is the High Courts of India. Here the question is A. There are 25 high courts in India. B. Punjab, Haryana, and Union Territory of Chandigarh have a common high court. C. National Capital Territory of Delhi has a high courts of its own. Directly, we can see in chapter 34, High Courts, page number 353. At present, there are 25 high courts in the country. Out of them, only 3 high courts have jurisdiction in more than one state, and Delhi alone has a separate high court. This is given in the first, like basically the third paragraph on the first page of the chapter. Down below, you can see it. And regarding point number 2, so 1 and 3 are covered here. Regarding point number 2, chapter 34, page number 361, there's a list of all the high courts of India given. So if you check in the list at point number 20, Punjab and Haryana and Chandigarh have a common high court, right? Okay, coming to question number 11, I think the numbering is wrong here, which is the topic of Lok Adalats. So, consider the following: disputes with mobile cellular companies, motor accidents, and pension cases. Now, which of the above, for which of the above Lok Adalats are held? Now, this particular exactly which cases are held by Lok Adalat, like in terms of the examples of cases, are not given in the chapter, but the topic Lok Adalat does mention like the definition of Lok Adalats, and you know which cases are taken up by Lok Adalats. Like the cases can be in a pre-litigation state. Only the cases which are non-compoundable under law are taken in Lok Adalats. So I think this is something you can read from the chapter itself, and I think a lot of other questions will come up where we will have something to mark in this chapter too. I think this is the end of the video. I want to keep it short. See, there are a lot of videos on YouTube on what exactly is the solution, right? But what I believe in is that even if you watch it once, it's difficult to remember things from a video. The entire idea of this video is that after you watch this video, you open your Lakshmikant. I'll put this PDF on my Telegram channel, and the entire idea is that I want you to sit down and just mark it. If it works for you, like mark it in the book and write like which year and which question this talks about, so that whenever we are revising, we are at least revising the parts which have already come. And I think it's better than watching videos all the time. It's better than watching videos. We can directly go to a book and revise the highlighted parts. And thank you so much. I'm not saying this is the best way, I'm just saying this is one way, and this is one way we can try and make our lives easier, and bring some sort of peace in the chaos that is there in the UPSC preparation. So thank you so much for staying till the end, and please let me know if there are any suggestions in the comments below.